Essentially, you know what the title is going to be. It deals with strategy and governance of IT. And when you start to think about it, you know, the objectives of IT governance is essentially to align the business and IT more effectively and provide lots of value. It's also in the execution of program and project initiatives, I should say the effective execution, and also making sure that the ongoing operational and infrastructure services are working well and consistently. And finally, evaluating the performance of IT, both externally to the senior executives in organizations as well as internally within IT to the CIO, if there is a CIO in the particular organization. I will use one case study of a global consumer products company that's a multi-billion-dollar company that went through a significant evaluation and then implementation of IT governance methodologies, and share with you what worked and why, what didn't work and why, and what areas could be improved by the organization. And some of these may apply to your organizations as well. Governance, let's define governance. Governance, in simplistic terms, formalizes and clarifies oversight, accountability, and decision rights. In other words, who has the right to make certain decisions, and making sure that everything is working according to, you know, some sort of a plan, etc. And essentially, as part of that, the components include aligning IT investments and priorities, which deals with portfolio investment management more closely to the business, ensuring that IT delivers on its plans, budgets, commitments, and promises, managing risks, vulnerabilities, and contingencies proactively. In other words, not doing it after something has occurred, but trying to essentially anticipate something from happening and then trying to prevent it from happening. And finally, improve the IT business demand management. IT never runs out of work, and one of the issues is, you know, how to prioritize and how to manage the performance, and how basically to develop key performance indicators that actually are meaningful to the organization, as I mentioned before. Dr. Peter Weil is the director of the Center for Information Research at MIT. They've been around for many, many, many years, and one of the studies that they did several years ago was to look at around 250 enterprises in 23 countries around the world, and the conclusion, one of the conclusions of the studies was firms with superior IT governance had 20% higher profits than firms with poor governance, given the same strategic objectives. That's rather significant, and you can actually increase your profits by reducing costs if you're consistent in implementing governance processes, which we'll talk about. And Susan Dallas from the Gartner Group also identified that over 75% of businesses today have ineffective or non-existent governance. That clearly is changing. A lot of organizations are much more concerned about governance and reporting, etc. And they're doing something about it. And hopefully this presentation will help you to learn, if you haven't already, if you already don't know about it, how to implement an effective IT governance framework and roadmap, which brings us to the next slide, slide 10. And essentially, the slide that I'm going to talk about, which follows this, number 11, is grounded in industry best practices. As I mentioned, I did author a book and looked at about 12 to 15 case studies and tried to essentially identify the common threads across all these companies where they were successful. But essentially, IT governance really consists of 6 critical imperatives. Imperatives are things that you have to do if you want to survive and prosper. And they are major components. And again, it leverages best practices. Clearly, in order for IT to be aligned more effectively with business, it makes a whole lot of sense for a business to have a business plan. And the objectives for the business, which include demand management and identifies a number of IT projects that eventually may or may not be approved going forward. And that includes portfolio investment management. Which projects should we invest in and why? That's followed by the IT plan and objectives, which addresses the demand management on an annual and sometimes strategic basis. The third component is IT plan execution, which deals really with program project management on the development side and on the potential maintenance side, and with IT service management, or ITEL, IT infrastructure library, on the operational and infrastructure side, as well as other activities such as security, which has become a very significant issue and opportunity for IT organizations, as well as for businesses themselves. A fourth category is performance management and metrics. If you don't measure it, it doesn't count. So therefore, it's very important to really identify the right metrics, for example, and also institute risk management and change management and configuration management and many other of those kinds of processes. Since many IT functions today outsource a significant part of their IT functions outside, vendor management and outsourcing has become a significant both issue and opportunity, and essentially that's part of execution management. Just because you outsource doesn't mean you're not responsible for the work. You're always responsible for the work, and that's what IT is about. And finally, clearly, developing people and continuously improving the processes within IT and between IT and the businesses is also part of governance as well. Slide 11 identifies a pictorial representation of a framework with the areas of work that I just identified, the business plan at the very top box, and the people development at the very bottom box. And in the middle, there are a number of components that obviously support the areas of work that I've identified. And finally, the last column on the right deals with deliverables and references, etc. This is a very large topic, and obviously this is a very busy slide, but I couldn't put, there are more things that should go on here, but because of space and readability, it is what it is. But it does focus on the components and subcomponents of the major areas of work. If you look at the IT plan execution and delivery box at the very right, you're dealing with project management body of knowledge, CMMI, ITEL, SDLC, Systems Development Lifecycle, COBIT, which is an audit framework, etc., developed by ISACA. There are lots of standards out there, and there's no point in reinventing the wheel. Use what works in your particular environment, and that's essentially how you might be able to become much more effective. So this is a framework, and this really is part of the book that I've essentially authored, and I go into each one of these major components in much more detail. We now start the case study, specifically of Consumer Products Company. In my book, essentially, I promised that I would not reveal the name of the companies, and that's how I got lots of cooperation. And that's the case in this situation as well. But this company, just to provide some attributes, is a consumer products company in a competitive industry, essentially that operates in 80-some-odd countries. The CIO reports into the CEO and is a member of the executive management team, and that's where the CIO ought to be reporting, not to a VP of finance or other places, because and they need to be part of the executive management team, and they need to be part of the C-suite, if you would. The company is in transition from a decentralized environment to a much more coordinated regional and global management environment, not centralized, but coordinated, so they can take advantage of operating synergies, cost reduction, obvious cost reductions, etc. The IT strategic plan is new, relatively new, and not yet linked to business, but they're in the process of actually doing that as we speak. IT has many disparate applications. Since it comes from a decentralized environment, many of the business units,